now a little bit of physiology, and I think that this will be basic for many of us, but I like to keep it simple, both when it comes to physiology and when it comes to rowing technique. I like to keep it simple. Most of you will probably know most of things, but we have a good base for discussion, and this is how I look on physiology in rowing in a way. When I'm thinking about physiology, I'm always thinking a lot about the rowing race. What is the demands? What is the energy cost? And how can we fulfill them? We know that to row 2,000 meter as fast as you can, we know that the energy contribution mainly comes from the aerobic system. So we know that in the end, it's rowing is an endurance sport, and it's even though that the races are actually going faster and faster, we still think that these figures are perhaps a little bit low. So rowing is probably more an aerobic sport than these figures shows. And we do, of course, we do a lot of work to lift this quality. This quality is as you know, almost proportionally related to muscle size. And this is also one of the key factors why lightweighters don't row as fast as heavyweighters, because they have less muscle volume. And as you know, the contribution during a race looks like this, about. That in the start, the energy demands are very high, but the VO2 system hasn't started yet. So it takes about 90 seconds to start that up. And in the middle of the race, there is almost balance between the parameters. And then in the end of the race, there is a sprint where oxygen consumption actually goes down, but energy production goes up. And what we're discussing now is how, in Norway now, we do a project a little bit about how we can do this, this can be even more efficient, and how we can individualize this curve for individuals. How can we make the VO2 consumption go up faster? So what we do is we measure oxygen consumption and do different kind of starts to find out how we can get the VO2, the oxygen consumption up faster. So we don't believe that we need to win the start, but what we want is to be quicker up to have VO2 max, and therefore be able to sustain, to refrain too much from lactic acid. And what we also look a little bit on is that when we look at young people, they can have a high peak of VO2, but the peak you see from the most experienced and the best athletes is that they can come up in maximum VO2 and they can sustain that for a long time. So I think that is a more important quality, to have a lot of surface under the curve. To be successful in rowing, we need to know the demands. We need to know what is required. And a lot of the fact, we can find that in here. We can find that here. We can see that you need a high VO2. We can see that you need a semi-high anaerobic capacity. You can see the distribution. So we know the demands. And what we of course do as the next step is to check the status. We know that you need as high VO2 as possible in rowing. And you know that you need a certain anaerobic capacity. Then we make a plan, of course, long time and short time. What do we want to evaluate when? And we do adjustments along the way. We do tests 4 times a year for the elite group to follow up how powerful are they, how endurant are they, how high is the anaerobic threshold. And then we make a adjustment, and we make documentations. I mean, the biggest documentation we have is a training diary, and people filling in. We can easily see after a season, did we get the results that we wanted? No, we didn't. And then we can go back in the training diary, and we can find that people have 30 days of illness, 30 days of bad training, or so it's very often you can find the explanations of what the result you get in the documentation. I think it's online actually, so you can. There is people. It's free and it's online. So I think there is people from different countries using it. So you can get the web address and see if it's possible. I think it's a little bit like Polar, but there are a few programs in the market, and you can also, the coach can have a subscriptions. You can attach your coach to this online diary, and if you have like 3-6 days in a row, there will be an alarm clock to your coach. We make in Sweden and Norway we have an analysis of demands. These are the requirements that we think you need to be a top athlete. Yeah, and then we can do tests and we can do optical evaluation about this is how good one athlete is aerobically, this is how much strength he has, this is the technical skills, these are the mental skills, and this is a lifetime skills. And then we can have a discussion of demands, how we're going to fulfill all the branches. With evaluation forms, but also when you as a coach talk to the athletes, how good do you think you are mentally compared to the best in the world? And people are kind of good on self-evaluation. I think that also gives ownership. I mean, I need to evaluate this. I'm not as strong as I should be. As soon as you say that, I'm not as strong as mentally as I should be. And as soon as you say that, you're willing to take action. And I think this kind of thinking, it's really strategic. But we do it all the time. We do it all the time when we choose a restaurant, when we choose lover. I mean, we have these demands. I want this, and this is important. How close to what I want are we? So I think that we all have this thinking in us. But the best thing is to have it evaluated is also that you can actually see when your performance is going up. You can follow the development, because that is. We'll come back to that when we talk about coaching and leadership. That is one of the most important things, is to point out to the athletes that they actually develops. Yeah, because we train in the single sculler and everybody develops, and you're rowing 5 minutes and I'm just as far behind the second guy all the time. So we need to point out development for the athletes. That is one of the most important things in motivation strategies for, when I'm thinking about it, is that we can point out development. This is a study made in Sweden in the 1960s, and it's called the Dallas study. What happened in Dallas in the 1960s? They were supposed to send people up to space, and they wanted to know what happened with people if they don't have any resistance, if they don't have any training, what will happen to people. Mm-hmm. So they lost. In 21 days, they were staying in bed for 21 days, and they lost 30% of their. And then they got the training program, and then they developed after 2 months of training, they were all better than they were before they went to bed. And that is a really important finding, because it shows so easily what you do have a really big impact on your future performance. So it's one of the first studies on training. This is an aerobic system, and we need to develop both this system, and what we believe that in Norway, your people are really, because it's a little bit different all over the world. But in Norway, you believe that the heart size is a limiting factor for aerobic performance. So we do a lot of work to increase the heart size. And what we will do at this time of year is that we know that the heart is a muscle, and the heart needs to be trained hard to grow. And that's why we nowadays, when we go to Portugal for training camp, we do uphill running to stimulate the heart. at the same time as we do a lot of long, slow distance in rowing, because now we need to work with technique and have long workouts to actually increase the other system, that is the local system, that take that the blood that the heart is pumping out will be distributed to the working muscles in rowing, and that we need to work a lot with that, and therefore we need to have many long, slow distance workout. That's why we stimulate the heart by doing hill running twice a week when we are in Portugal now. Because we believe that if we just going into the boat and we do 5 minute pieces in really high speed, we will lose the ability to be effective in our technique. We need to work with the technique for the first month. But we know that when there were no rowing ergometers, and when people in Sweden had to do a lot of cross-country skiing during the winter, and because there was no ergometers, and they had it was before it got very popular to go on camp, they found out that they had a really good local system in the ski musculars. But after a few months on the water, or 3 or 4 months on the water, they had a good local endurance system in the rowing muscles. So it takes time to build up the muscles for rowing. And one of the guys in the lightweight double, Are, he had a year off, and he had a really high aerobic capacity in running, but he was a really bad rower after the year off. So it is important to row a lot to be a good rower. But we think that we can do that for 6 or 7 months a year, and then we can row a little bit less and work with our aerobic capacity. And as you can see as you saw in our training program, the intensity is described in number. We know that in intensity 1, long slow distance, where we can work for about 1 to 6 hours continuously. And we know that we have 45 to 65% of heart rate max, and that is about 55 to 72% of maximum VO2. And when we measure lactate, we stay between 0.8 and 1.5. And what we do is that when we do these anaerobic tests, anaerobic threshold tests, we work as do you do anaerobic threshold tests? And then of course everybody got their own curve, and they will see where to stay when they do this kind of training. And of course here the training models that we do in the different zones is, I mean, here is long slow distance, of course, continuously rowing, like you said, 16. We have on Monday morning we have 16 Ks of rowing, and then we have 45 minutes of rest, and then 12 K of rowing. Then we stay in intensity 1 and intensity 2. In those intensities, we believe that we're building up the capillary system and the mitochondria density to be able to utilize and use oxygen who is coming to the working muscles. And on Tuesday morning, in this program, we have a typical anaerobic threshold workout. We have 6 to 8 times 10 minutes. It's a typical workout for this intensity. And on intensity 5 and intensity 6, we believe that we don't need to do much more than 50 or 60 workouts in these zones per year to keep it, maybe once, maybe sometimes twice a week, to maintain that quality. And in each of those sessions, I think you might be 20 or 30 minutes in that zone. And what the latest finding in endurance sport in Norway is that people are moving away from intensity and zone 5 and do more in zone 4 and do a little bit longer workouts. So we can have 12 times 4 minutes with 1 minute's rest in zone 4, for example, instead of 5 minutes pieces in. We also do some weights, and we have some motivation to why we do weights. We do weights to be strong, of course, because you have to be strong in rowing. We do it to be powerful and fast, because to me it's a big difference. To be strong is more like building up muscle volume, to be able to lift something with high resistance. To be fast is more to create power and more close to rowing. To stay free from injury. We do a lot of work nowadays to stay free from injury, and in my thoughts when I started to work in Norway, we'll come back to that later on, I thought that physiotherapy was only to prevent injury or to actually come back from injury. But I'm not nowadays. I'm extremely sure that it's really close to performance to have a good knowledge about your posture, because I've seen that there is such a big difference. If you ask a maybe if you ask a rower to sit down on the rowing ergometer, they very often sit like this and try to reach length like this. But when I compare the best rowers nowadays in Norway to the second best rowers, the best rowers is rowers who can actually sit here and naturally sit here, and they can sit here on the slide and on the floor. And because then they will get a much better position in the catch, and they will also use their body swing and the body weight in the finish. And greater maximum power also kind of creates better endurance capacity. If I can lift 200 kilos in a squat, it's probably better than if I can do 100 if I'm going to do as many as I can on 50 kilos. So it is a factor to be strong. I think that is a good factor, because you're going to lift 40 kilos as many times as you can. Then to have a great power to take from is a good quality. And if you have to use a lot of force to lift something, you will have tension in the muscle, close the blood vessels. So if you can use little power in each of your maximum power in each stroke, you will have a better flow of blood through the muscle. When you do rowing, when you do a rowing race, if you can use little of your maximum power during the rowing stroke, if you use a little, then you will also have blood flow through your muscle. Also, if you're strong, you have a better technique and a better accuracy. If you're really weak, you will have a less good technique. But there is a paradox between doing strength training and endurance. This is typical what happens. We have sometimes in the autumn we have weightlifting projects, strength project where people need to build more muscles. Yeah, so when people do a lot of weight training and even perhaps eating creatine to gain more weight, the muscle fiber will grow, and there will be a better blood support, a lousier blood support to the muscle. So if you decide that one of your rowers has to build more muscles, you must be prepared that he or she will lose endurance after that period. More and more now they found that there's different people responding to different kinds of training. So the key factor in Scandinavia nowadays is individualization. We need to find out, what do you respond from? What do you respond from? What do you respond from? Because Olaf Tufte, he responds from doing hour after hour after hour of training. He getting better by the hour. But Kjetil Borch, who rode in the double together with him in the Olympics, if he do too many hours, he will get pale, cold, warm at the same time and lose energy totally. So those two guys need to be. They were in the double perhaps 40% of the time, but otherwise they had to do training in the single and doing training differently, because they needed different stimulus to develop, and that is a new trend. So now, to interview athletes, to watch them during training, is a really big factor, I think, to develop top athletes. We have a small system with few rowers in Norway, and Great Britain have a gigantic system with hundreds and hundreds of rowers to choose from. So this is the possibility for us to be better than them. It's the only chance we have to be better than them, because we don't have so many to take from, but to know our athletes and to be able to push just the right factor to make them go faster. I think that is a possibility for coaches in Norway anyway, and I'm sure it can be the same here. To know the athletes and to know exactly what to point on to get them a little bit better. So I believe very much. I believe very much in individualization. And Örjan Madsen, he was one of the big researchers in Norway, and he stopped now. And he also worked as a swimming coach in Germany. And his last word when he stopped working as a physiologist was, "Do individualize." And it takes time. Coming back to that all the time. I mean, mobility can change from day to day, strength from week to week, speed from month to month. Endurance, it takes years to build up endurance. And rowing, who is not one of the basic skills in our movement pattern, it's a skill that we have to learn. So it takes many years to be a top rower. You very, very seldom see juniors who actually is getting excellent top athletes in rowing the first year as seniors. And if you don't see good development in your athletes, what can you do? I mean, you can rest, of course. It's the most acute thing that you do. And then you can do some changes in training program, intensity or composition of the program. But you can also change the environment or do all the above. So I talked to Jürgen Steinacke, he's head of medical commission in FISA, and he said that if you see bad development in a short period of 5 days, you should reflect. We do some testing, of course, and we have talked a lot about it, so I don't think we have to stay there. But what we do, the tests, they have to be relevant to the sport, of course, or to the capacity that we're testing. They have to be valid, and they have to be reliable. It means that they have to be, every time, if we have an improvement in the athlete, it's going to show on the test, otherwise the test is not reliable. Standardized, I mean, we do the test the same time of week, same time of day, and we do the test of, we have the same kind of training before the time we do the tests. And I think it's also really important that we coaches inform and give feedback on the results, because otherwise they will be worthless to the athletes. And the test we do to test our physiology is, of course, maximum oxygen uptake, anaerobic threshold, as we said. We do some sub-maximum testing as warm-up. People just row on a specific speed, and they're checking heart rate. And we can do also some type lactate samples. We do biomechanical tests. We use Valery Kleshnev. Do you use him as well? Yeah. So we do him two or three times a year. And of course, we have a lot of observation during training. Training. In the beginning, I think that training is a really pedagogical process as well. For me, as I told you this morning, earlier on, every day we start our training in the kitchen. And even though that Olaf Tufte has heard thousands of times why we do different kind of training, we always start up with talking about, this is the training today, these are the physiological response we expect from that training, and this is how it's supposed to be done. Every day we start up with talking about, this is the main objectives, main target for this session. It can be Everybody got the same information about the physiological response, and then I go to every team that I coach, and these are the technical skills that we're working on today. If I can see this physiological work from you today, and these technical, if you perform these technical demands that we talk about, then we're happy. Then we can say that this was a good day. So it's 5 minutes in the kitchen. There's 2 minutes with each crew on the way out, and there's 2 minutes debriefing with each crew after the training. And I think that if we can manage to do that, that's a big difference compared to if we do not. And I have an hour by car to the lake that we're training on, and every day when I go to the lake, I prepare mentally. So I think I'm also nervous in kind of before every training. So I think that's kind of normal. I prepare mentally for who I'm going to say what to, and what are, if we're doing a lineup and we train together, what are the what kind of conflicts can occur on the water? How am I going to distribute my attention? So I try to prepare for mentally for every workout, every session. Because, as I told you, the key factor in Norwegian sports, not only in rowing, is to have good daily habits. To have this, that the training really works, that the training are interesting to attend to, that the training are, because also if I tell people almost how they're going to feel, then we get a little bit better quality. Maybe 0.5% per day, but that adds when it's after 3 or 4 years, that really adds up. Very often when I collect the crews, I will tell the crews when we have our meeting. I will say, you in the double, this is what I want to see from you today, and you in the 4, this is what I want to see from you, and you in the single, this is what I want to see from you, because then we also create relations, and everybody wants to. The people in the 4 can say to the people in the double, I thought you did well today. You were actually exceeding the goals. So that creates an environment that is when everybody's happy for daily training results. And when we talk about the training, we're trying to connect this with the performance skills. Today we're going to do 30 kilometers of long, slow distance. What effect does that have on your performance skills? What physical response do we expect? What technical response do we expect? How close? Because when you're having 30 for 16 and then 12 kilometers of long, slow distance, it's not for everybody to understand what this has to do with 2,000 meter competition. So then we try to explain that to the athletes. And we have a long tradition in Norway, and even though since the first elite group 1970 in Norwegian rowing, training has been coming first. Training is the first thing, and the people has been really trying to get more and more kilometers every year. There is a difference in thoughts in how much can we actually train compared to how little can we train and still have development. Of course, the key word is development, and I saw a German study where people has done the same training program 2 times a year. One period when they were on camp, and one period when they were having exams in school. And the response was totally different from the same program. So you have to know the athletes and see if we're coming back a little bit to that. What are bad responses from the athletes? They have good sleep, they have good appetite, but in the period of exam, they were really had no good response. They had showed symptoms of overtraining, overload, just after 10 days. And this was not an intermediate college student. This was actually the German national team. And compared to studies made in Norway on cross-country skiers, we're doing a little bit more power, a little bit more speed, and a little bit less volume than before. We're training a little bit less now than when Olaf Tufte trained at his most. So we have athletes who do more than 1,000 hours of training a year, but the main athlete is about 850 and 900 hours a year, and that's a little bit less than before. We have a strength and power training all year round. We do sessions in the gym. The last session before the World Championships is between 7 to 10 days before the World Championships. So we do weight training all year round. We try to make a little bit of difference between endurance and aerobic training, because endurance is more a muscle. Like we do endurance workouts in the gym. We do like 100 squats, but we don't conclude that as an aerobic training. That is weight training for us, even though it has a local aerobic power as the purpose. I had a question before, after the last session, why do you do 16 plus 12 kilometers? Why don't you do 28 kilometers in a row? And to me, that is having more with focus and to prevent injury. I think to us it's good to go on land, change clothes, and have some nutrition, and go out and do a new session, and then I'll be able to talk to the people as well. But the training on Monday morning in the training program we have is 28 kilometers of long slow distance with a short break in between. We think that is really, but when people are training as much as 1,000 hours a year, we think it's really important to keep down the intensity on the long slow distance. Because when I see people started to row really fast in the long slow distance, that's a little bit of an alarm clock to me. Because I think I have a slide on that later on, but what usually happens then is that the intensity on the long slow distance going up, and the intensity of the high quality training is going down, and suddenly you got everything like a gray spot in the middle, and we call that lost in lactate, and suddenly you don't have any progress in your training again. So one of the first thing that I do when I see that people having bad progress in training, we try to get the intensity down on the long slow distance. That might get us back on track again.